BetQL Network.
Well, I guess we're back on the radio, so I have to stop my Steve Kerr slander. All I was saying is that Steve Kerr got very lucky as a player. He played with Michael Jordan. He had Phil Jackson as his coach. Then he played with Tim Duncan, and he had Greg Popovich as coach. And then he became an NBA head coach, and he was handed Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green, who had already basically figured it out like the year before. I'm not saying he's not a great coach. I'm just saying maybe a little bit overrated. Anyway, welcome back into the show. That's Brendan Tobin. I'm the sports machine, Sean Levine. You're a Miami guy. Who's a better coach, Kerr or Spoelstra? Come on, dude.
I mean, come
Not
on.
even close.
Come on. You should know who I'm going to say. I love Eric Spoelstra.
I know
Eric Spoelstra is a beautiful maniac. I remember, you know what's crazy though, dude? Like, I remember Eric Spoelstra. I covered his first season. I remember like him just walking to we have this thing called Bayside, which is basically like a big tourist trap mall across from the stadium. And I remember games from the 2008 season when he first was head coach, like walking and getting his Starbucks before the game. Nobody bothered him. He just
triple latte.
Could go get his coffee and then head on over to the arena for work. But nowadays, I feel like he's got an assistant for that.
I did Starbucks for the first time in my life the other day, and I went in and I ordered a tall, and they gave me a small, and I didn't know what was going on. Apparently, if you say you want a tall, that's a small, and a large has a different name. I'm never going back. Way too intimidating. Way too intimidating for me. Speaking of intimidating, Israel Adesanya used to be one of the most intimidating fighters in the game. He's back in the octagon. He's the one who's trying to get his belt back against Dracus du Plessis. That's coming up a couple of weeks at UFC 305. This is a real grudge match. DDP has proven that he deserved to be the champion, right? He took out Sean Strickland in a really close fight. What's your early lean in this one? I can't believe that Izzy's the underdog at plus 110.
Yeah, I was curious. I was curious to see what the odds were for this because I feel like as just on principle, I got to take Israel Adesanya because I do feel like it is a close fight. And you got to wonder, like, all right, what the hell was that last performance against Sean Strickland? Was that just a bad day at the office for Izzy? Was that Sean Strickland showing that he was that guy? Because hell, we're maybe judges away from this being Izzy versus Sean Strickland too, or being Sean Strickland versus somebody else because they wouldn't do the Izzy rematch. I don't know, but we're here. It's got a level of grudge. The one thing I would say with Izzy, it does feel like when there are stakes and juice to a fight, he does seem to be the classic can turn it up a little bit, you know, like he's like if he's got a little extra juice to it, if he's got a little extra motivation, that's when he's more dangerous. If it's a fight that he's kind of ho-hum about, can play down to his competition a little bit. So I think if he is heated at Dracus du Plessis, and is going to bring that type of that extra gas to this fight, the guy at his best, I think he's one of the best ever reign in that weight class. I guess the question is, like, is he just past it? Has he had too many big fights? Has he beaten everybody there is? And it's hard to tap back into that, as we know with some of these long reigning champions. But I think him as a dog, I'll still rock with Stylebender for that one.
To a couple of the points that you just made there, when he got knocked out by Alex Pereira, he came back and knocked him out and then mocked his kid. So you're right. We've seen that even if he loses, he can come back and still be awesome. And then on top of that, to your point about Sean Strickland, who dominated the fight against Izzy, and Izzy was a pretty sizable favorite in that fight and pretty much got pieced up the entire time. I just think that was Izzy's worst night because Izzy has proven to me that he can fight a bunch of different guys with a bunch of different styles. There's no way, and it will be Sean Strickland again if Izzy is to beat DDP. So we will see that rematch. I actually think Izzy'd probably be the favorite. I think most people know what I just said to be true, that just wasn't the real Stylebender.
Yeah, it's actually funny you mentioned the kid thing because the thing I remember that was in Miami, and I just remember thinking to myself, well, it's not just I was there, but it's just I remember Izzy coming into the press conference, and I'm like, man, he got drunk fast. Because he was toasty for that press conference. It was a long Dana White press conference, so I think he threw back a bunch of Jack and Cokes. But I remember Izzy coming to that press conference like, man, he is lit. And he was like, I am ready to party in Miami.
Like, if you're Cowboy Cerrone and you're like Stone Cold Steve Austin, you're coming with a couple of beers, it's going to take you a little while. But if you're drinking that hard stuff, it's not going to take long, dude. I mean, if you're tied to Ivas and you're doing shoeies and you're that size, it's going to take at least, I would think, a half dozen shoeies for you to even feel it. But if you're Israel Adesanya and you got that bottle of Jack and it's halfway gone by the time you're back doing your interviews, you're going to be feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I think that but to get back to your point about it, yeah, that was his worst night. Because even in the loss to Pereira, he was winning most of that fight. You know, he felt like he was on his way to victory up until that last bomb that got him. So I don't know. I don't know what that was against Sean Strickland. It's not taking anything away from Sean Strickland because, as we said, he had a really good performance against DDP as well. But I think with the extra heat on this, maybe the idea that DDP is a little bit more of a finisher, so he's going to be on edge and on his P's and Q's a little bit more. I just like Izzy. I think if you're getting that value for that guy, that good a fighter, I think you got to take it.
I know, but it might be a trap because he's an underdog and he's so much fun to bet on and so much fun to watch when he's knocking people out and mocking their children, as we've talked about. It's just, what if he is Kamaru Usman, right? What if these are the beginning stages of what Tony Ferguson was 3 or 4 years ago, where he was a great fighter and you could see him slowing down a little bit? And maybe Tony Ferguson's a bad example because that guy really hit the wall. All I'm saying is we've seen a lot of fighters, the Robbie Lawlers, the Cowboy Cerrones, the Joanna Jaceks, the Ronda Rouseys, all since we've been doing this show over the last 3 or 4 years, where when they slow down, it doesn't take long, and then you blink and they're gone. So all I'm saying is I hope that I'm wrong about this one, but in the case of Usman, it kind of feels that way. And if Stylebender loses this fight, it feels like it's heading down that path.
The other thing, too, that you got to realize is he's been in a lot of big fights, and he's 35 now. You know, and like,
is he 35?
Yeah, he's 35 and DDP is 30. And you're like, there's just something about that magic number. Now it's more definitive with the lower weight classes. I don't think that anybody's won the belt. Maybe I think maybe Bilal just did this. But other than that, it's the record after 35 is not very good in title fights, especially I think 170 and below. But it's not only he's 35, but he's been a very busy 35. I mean, this guy came into the UFC a little bit later in life, but like stormed on immediately with a ton of matchups. So you just wonder, is there a little bit of the gas tank that's tapped? I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's too late because he just turned 35, but there is an element of age there you have to wonder about.
What does he say? Black don't crack. He's right. He's 35. That is crazy. Wow. And what a resume he has. Yeah, there's a couple of the Marvin Vittoras and Paulo Costas on there, but there's also some Anderson Silva, some Joel Romero's, a couple of Robert Whitakers. Like, that guy has fought anybody and everybody. And now, even at this latter stage of his career, gets a chance to get the belt back against Dracus du Plessis. Co-main event that night, UFC 305, Kai Kara France versus Steve Usyk. You're an Usyk guy, aren't you?
I like Usyk. I think it's actually surprising they're doing a double Australian night. Like, usually I feel like it's always Australia versus the world. So they're this is the fight, I guess. Everyone's
Matey versus Matey.
Yeah. Couple of dingoes going at it, man. So yeah, Usyk's obviously coming off of what was a pretty good performance against Pantoja in the championship fight. You know, to be vaulted into that kind of competition right away was pretty impressive for him. Kai Kara France has kind of been the contender on the outside there at flyweight. So yeah, that's a fun matchup between those two. That's a fun striking affair.
Yeah, Tai Tuivasa is on this card also. I mean, you want to talk about two big boys going at it. Goodness gracious. What is this going to be? Like 500 pounds of humanity? Tai Tuivasa versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I don't know who's going to win, but I'll tell you this much. Somebody's getting knocked out, and it's not going a round and a half. That one's not going to take too long.
Yeah, it does feel like if I had to handicap it, like who needs it more, it does feel like Tai Tuivasa needs that fight more than Rozenstruik does. Because he is
2.5 years ago, BT, both these guys really weren't that far from fighting for the belt.
I know, but Rozenstruik is coming off of a win. And Tai Tuivasa is halfway to a Tony Ferguson. He's got 4 straight. So
that's not where you want to be, huh? 4 straight losses. It's crazy, really, when you say it out loud, and kind of sad, even though we're laughing like a couple of jerks, that Tony Ferguson has lost in the fashion that he's lost. Like getting choked out today, not that big a deal, but getting your face kicked in by Michael Chandler when you look like an 80-year-old man, like it hasn't been a pretty ending for Tony Ferguson. It's how many more times do you think, like if he doesn't retire, how many more times possibly can we have this conversation? Like his next fight has to be his last one, right? Or if he wins, does he keep going? It's just crazy.
That's the thing though with the UFC. Like, I don't know. Sometimes we hear about these contracts that are super long, and I don't. They just feel with him like, all right, what are we gonna do? Not have him? Like, might as well just put because obviously we always talk about him. Like, we always talk about is this the day Tony Ferguson? So like. The only negative it is on Tony's body, but as far as like business, well, they just put him in the third up on the main card for an ABC night. If he comes back and fights again, he's going to be on a main card. He's going to get a big showing. He's going to either boost up some young kid or he'll have some matchup against an old guy. I don't know who they'll do him against, but yeah, I don't know, man. It's
bring Cowboy off his ranch and be like, look, you lost 7 at the end of your old ass career. Tony Ferguson's lost 8. You guys are both done. You're never going to fight again after this, but at least one of you bums, that's rude. One of you old fellas is going to go out with a win. And then the other guy is just going to go out in the pasture, as Alexander Hernandez once said about Cowboy Cerrone. Matisse Gamrot is on the card, UFC 305. The Leech is back. Lee Jianglin is back. And Walter Walker. What do you know about him? The younger brother of Johnny Walker fights Junior Tafa. So we got lots of big guys on this card.
I like it, man. It's a fun card. It's going to be an entertaining one. They've been the pay-per-views have been good lately. The pay-per-views have been you can't say much about those. I mean, the random fight nights like next week where you got Spivak Taboria. I mean, I don't know, like that's like, hey, we just got to put this on TV. But
although today's was awesome. Today's was
today was an ABC card. Like they ain't going to Fight Island week. Fight Island's gonna get the strong performance.
I enjoyed the card today, right? We got to see Cheeto and Figgy. That's a fun fight. I mean, Tony Ferguson, I'll talk smack on him and say he should retire, but I also still enjoy watching him fight when he makes the walk. I'm like, maybe El Kukui is going to be El Kukui tonight. We saw Bullet. He's got the different colored eyes and the red beard and the lazy eye. Corey Sandhagen. I love the card today. Back to boxing for 1 second. We're going to bring on Marcel Dorff coming up here in just a few minutes, and we'll wrap things up here on the BetQL network. Back to boxing for a second. We didn't talk about Canelo. He does have a fight coming up. If Canelo wins and if Bud Crawford wins, do you think like by the end of the year they're going to announce that they're fighting each other, or is that just a fever dream that I have?
It's always interesting to know like when they announce these things because boxing is a little bit weird. They don't tend to do like the UFC where we know 4 months in advance. Like it's usually like 8 weeks out. That's when the fight's announced, especially for Canelo. But I think off of that, like there definitely has to be a lot of buzz around it. I just don't know what else Canelo does. Like this Edgar Berlanga thing. I do think that Canelo gets to the point where he knows the fans are going to get a little bit restless and he commands a lot of money. That's the thing is like, you can't keep commanding these type of paydays and putting up, bad pay-per-view performances, as far as like the number of people who will buy it. He's still loved, man. Like, look, I was at his last fight against Munguia. It's a crazy atmosphere. It's a fun thing to be at, but also half that building was rooting for Munguia. And so I do wonder, when does he go back to, all right, I got to give the fans a big time fight. And he may say that, the fan that he has nothing to gain from the Terrence Crawford fight. I cannot disagree with that more. I think that's two of the best pound for pound. It's not a big height discrepancy. Yes, Canelo is, Canelo's very hard to stop and he's been there with bigger guys. But that's kind of the fun of it. He doesn't get knocked out. I just gave you the list of Terrence Crawford. His last 10 fights have been knockouts. So it's as good a fight boxing could make. I don't know how we could leave this without it happening.
And that's my frustration with Canelo is it's not inactivity because he does fight frequently enough for me. It's just these names that he's fighting. Like, dude, go out there in your prime and fight, because is his legacy already set? Does he have the triple G's on his resume and the Floyd Mayweathers and all that? Absolutely. He's fought big enough names, But ultimately, at this point in your career, nobody cares about you fighting Berlanga. Everybody would gather around their TV and buy the pay-per-view. If you fought Bud Crawford, hey, my advice is free here in the BetQL network. That would be probably the biggest fight that I can think of, really at any weight class, if they're able to make it in the next year. Even money, who would you bet?
Crawford.
See, I'm leaning Canelo. I thought you were going to say Canelo. That's a tough one. Although I do think Crawford wins tonight, easy by knockout. You talked me into that one. He's knocked everybody out he's fought in the last 6 years. He's like a punches and bunches guy. He's putting him to sleep. Dude. Who knew? All right, coming up on the other side, somebody that knows it all. Marcel Dorff. Big Marcel joins the show right here on the BetQL network.